YouTube Sports Nation, welcome to the 34th episode of On-Ayer. I am your host, as usual, Ryan Ayers. Tonight is the official kickoff of the college football season. Cal and Hawaii taking on each other down there, down under, in Australia. 34-14 at halftime. Cal is blowing out Hawaii as expected. This is just the appetizer for the start of the season. Next weekend, next Saturday, Sunday, and into Monday is being built as the greatest opening college football weekend of all time, and I have to agree. Normally, a lot of these teams like to play patty cakes, and at this point, with this BCS being kicked to the curb and the college football playoff now into its third year, what we've all wanted was big time, and I mean big time. No pussing out on the college football slate in the non-conference part of your schedule. And so all these teams out there right now, all the way from Florida State taking on Ole Miss, Notre Dame taking on Texas, Houston playing Oklahoma, Wisconsin in their backyard at Lambeau Field, hosting essentially a home game versus LSU. But the one I want to touch on first before we really dive hardcore into the whole landscape of college football by the end of this video is number one Alabama, Roll Tide, against the Fighting Men of Troy, number 20th ranked USC. USC already trying to strike up and poke the bear a little bit with some new t-shirts they've been rolling out, trying to get under the skin of Alabama. When your team is coached by Nick Saban, it's very unlikely that you're going to be ever overmatched in the mental game. You saw how the Notre Dame football players 4 years ago in the national championship kind of watched the Alabama players walking out and rolling out of the tunnel onto the field, and it was like they were all in awe of seeing Nick Saban and crew go out. So you're never going to be able to get under the skin of Nick Saban's crew. Alabama, number one team in the country in the preseason polls. Why not? They don't even know what quarterback they're going to trot out. I think in the end it's going to be Cooper Bateman. He's got more experience than anybody else out there. He's going to get at least the first shot with Nick Saban. Nick Saban just wants out of his quarterback right now a guy that can manage the offensive game plan and not turn the football over. You're always going to see Alabama stop the run and run the ball down your throat. So with that, you're going to see number one Alabama take on number 20 USC. And you don't know what you're going to get out of USC other than they have exceptional athletes. Adoree Jackson and Juju Smith-Schuster. Those guys, I think, are two of the best, if not the two best athletes in all of college football. But their head coach is a little bit brand new to this whole thing, being at such a powerhouse program. I think he might be a little bit too big for the moment. And with that, he's going to be having all of the spotlight on his football team. We saw last year's bowl game, they were not able to handle that and lost to a Big Ten team. And so how is he going to adapt to all the lights finally being on him for this football game, knowing he's no longer the interim head coach, and he's got some great athletes out there. So he's already going with some head games to try and get that football game going in his team's direction. But what I want to look into more or less is the schedules of these football teams. Down the line, I'm starting with this game, number 1 versus number 20, because I want to talk scheduling. Listening to these guys on the ESPN telecast right now, Mike Bellotti and company doing the play-by-play in color for this Cal-Hawaii game, they're talking about the Pac-12, and that's what I mainly want to get to right now, leading in from this USC-Alabama game, is how big time almost every single week is going to be for all the top-notch teams in that Pac-12. It's a loaded conference. And when you look at USC's conference schedule and then put that together with their non-conference schedule, it's going to begin with Alabama and end at the end of the regular season with Notre Dame, you wonder how much more contradictory the NCAA and this selection committee for the Final Four is going to become. I hear these announcers talking about how it's basically going to be dog eat dog in the Pac-12, and they're going to knock each other out, where you're going to see a lot of teams from Washington, Stanford, Cal, USC, and maybe even an Arizona gets in there with their senior quarterback. You look at that scenario, and it's just not fair that they could all end up with 2 and 3 losses. The Pac-12, without a doubt, outside of the SEC, because you never know what you're going to get with the SEC. Sometimes they have down years, other times they don't. But the Pac-12, in my opinion, is without a doubt the number 1 football conference in the country this year. And so now they're going to be penalized for that. They have 2 losses, or some might have 3 losses, but they're all, seems like, from Washington's going to be 14th ranked, Oregon top 25, USC top 20, Stanford's top 10. They never seem to go away. They're a little miniature version of Alabama. They stop the run and run the football down your throat. So the Pac-12, I hear from these announcers and a lot of prognosticators out there right now, are going to be left out of the Final Four selection process just because they're playing what exactly everybody said was going to have happen 3 years ago when this selection committee and the Final Four playoff was going to come about, was no more of these patty cake, cupcake teams on your schedule, especially in your non-conference slate of your schedule, because you can, as a program and athletic department, control that. You can't control in conference how bad you're going to be. You know, the Big Ten, in a way, has by bringing in 2 more garbage opponents to their slate in Rutgers and Maryland. But most of the time, you can't control your conference slate. So in order to be eligible for this Final Four, everyone talked about it years ago as this led up to this, you have to schedule in a variety, an eclectic blend. You have to bring a big-time schedule to the table. Otherwise, you're going to be left out. So now it's reversed. I'm hearing the reverse momentum of that talk from several years ago. Now it's the Pac-12 is going to be left out. Potentially the Big 12 could be left out. All because we're going to want to see now, I guess, the East Coast bias come into effect. The Big 10 is up for 1 or 2 teams. And the SEC could push for potentially 2 teams. I've got the SEC's back. They play such a week in, week out, tough schedule in their conference slate. And, you know, Alabama's going out and taking on USC, a top 25 opponent. But with that, I still don't think you deserve 2 teams per conference. This is a national playoff. So I think you have to find a way to go with strength of schedule. I'm seeing this, and I harped on this a few weeks ago. Michigan, all this talk about Michigan, I'm sure they have some talent for sure. They have a quarterback situation as well. It looks like John O'Korn will be the guy that wins that battle in the end. But when you have to wait 8 weeks to finally play somebody that may or may not at this point be in the top 25 of the polls, we'll see how Iowa comes together. You never know with them. They have an up and down football program year in and year out. But Michigan plays 4 teams right now in the top 50 in the country all year and don't have to play anybody for essentially 2 months into the season, where they can kind of Boise State it, if you will. Just keep staying healthy and moving along, playing your reserves and not getting too banged up. And then you get your 1 big-time game, essentially, or 2, Michigan State and Ohio State late in the season. I just think that's entirely unfair that they can play such a pansy schedule. Like I said, 4 top 50 teams in the country they're going to play. And they get to be waltzed right in because they're the mighty Big Ten. I don't see it. It's just completely a hypocrisy. You know, complete hypocrisy when everyone said a part of this deal, the media, the selection committee process, oh, you can't play these MAC schools in 1AA. You're going to have to go out and take on that nationwide schedule. But now the only teams that are doing it, Pac-12, are going to be completely penalized, and Notre Dame. Notre Dame just went through the last week of hell with 6 football players being suspended. One is kicked off the team for good. One is waiting through the appeals process. 4 guys are practicing still, but they are going to face a suspension of multiple games most likely. Will that affect them? We'll see. They have a lot of depth. You have 2 of the best quarterbacks in the country on the same roster, Malik Zaire and Deshaun Kaiser. But them, schedule-wise, they're taking on 7 teams in the top 44 in the country. That is a typical Notre Dame schedule, always looking to go out and play coast to coast. They'll play Navy. They'll play Florida State. They'll play Michigan State. Then they'll go play the central part of the country, Oklahoma and Texas. And of course, it's always set in stone. They're taking on USC and Stanford, 2 of the most traditional power teams in the country there on the West Coast. So you look at that situation, they're another team that can be grouped in like the Pac-12. They're going to play such a demanding schedule, coast to coast, a lot of flying, a lot of attention, a lot of basically the best effort all these teams can give that come into their stadium and or host Notre Dame, they're going to get because they're Notre Dame. So a lot of that stuff is seemingly going to be tossed to the curbside at this point. Big-time programs that are playing big-time competition are going to be left out of the playoff. So teams like Michigan and anybody else that you can think of, maybe an ACC opponent, Florida State, Clemson, they don't really have tough schedules at all. So is that what it's become to? You're looking at basically playing the softest schedule. It was supposed to be you're going to play big-time schedules now. Almost seems like teams, like I mentioned, especially Michigan this year with all the hype around Jim Harbaugh, are playing the weakest schedule, and they're going to be put in the playoff because of that. Like I said, that is not what college football is all about. They start off non-conference with Hawaii next year. Hawaii's down in Australia right now, and they have to fly all the way to Ann Arbor in less than a week now. They are what I call one of, if not the worst team in college football. They almost broke up the program and cut it off completely and shut it down. A couple years ago, they decided to keep it running. Next after that is traditionally the worst Pac-12 team in the country, and that is Colorado. They get them week 2 at home. You think they're going to go on the road for the 3rd week and play somebody difficult? Of course not. They take on University of Central Florida, who won absolutely 0 games last year. That is all they play in the non-conference. And to me, I'm not going to take this, oh, you're a Michigan hater. No, I'm a hater for people that aren't doing it the right way, try to sneak in and steal a spot in the Final Four by never really having a true non-conference test. Those are 3 patty cakes, and they're going to get preferential treatment off that. That is the exact opposite of what this football playoff is about. And with that, I want to let you know this was On Air, and I am Ryan Ayers.